Hi, my name is Ivan Tuttle, and I'm the author of a best selling book called A Journey to Hell, Heaven, and Back. And I decided that one of the best things I can do is actually read the book to you, because that's something that quite a few people have asked me to do. They found out that it was an audiobook, which you can still get it on audiobook. It's done very well. And they said, why don't you just read it? So I'm going to read one or two chapters a week. Well, I'll read them and record them more often than that, but I'll put them up, post them about once a week. And if you'd like to, just, come on, take a look at it each week. Look for the new download or two that might be out there on YouTube. And it's going to be under the Real Heaven Encounters YouTube page. So be glad, I'm glad you guys are watching this, and hopefully you enjoy it. I'm just going to read it to you. I'm going to start with chapter 1. I decided to do it the old-fashioned way. I'm not going to read the foreword or anything like that. You can get the book. In fact, if you just go to ivantuttle.com, just feel free to do that. Go to ivantuttle.com, and you can order the book there. It goes right to Amazon. You can get it in any format that you want it in. I'm not charging you anything to do that. I'm just giving you the link to get there, so you can go ahead and get your copy of the book. And hopefully you'll like it. So if you're tuning in, you probably want to find out more about it. So I'll be glad to do that. I'll also give some commentary about certain things, maybe before or after the chapter, if you would like that. I've had several people say, why don't you do that? So I might do something like that. So anyways, if you have your book, if you already have a copy of it and you'd like to read along with me, feel free to do that too. I'm going to start out at chapter 1. It's called Denial. It was February of 1978, and Grand Rapids, Michigan was very cold. There seemed to be an unusual amount of snow that month. We just experienced one of the worst winter storms in Grand Rapids history only a few weeks earlier. And it seemed like the snow just wasn't going to let up. I was working selling Oldsmobiles and Hondas at the time at a car dealership there in Michigan. It was Thursday, and I couldn't wait to get off of work and head to the bar. But first, I needed to go home and, of course, smoke a joint. I remembered being restless that night because, well, my left leg was bothering me. I thought it was just tight, or maybe I had a pulled muscle, calf muscle. So I tried stretching it out. About 8:30, I headed to the nightclub. I found a few ladies to dance with. But by 11 o'clock, my leg was throbbing so badly that I sat down and didn't dance anymore. I left around midnight, 2 hours earlier than usual, and by myself. Friday morning, around 7:30 a.m., I woke up to more pain in my left calf. I was wondering when the muscle cramp was ever going to relax so that it didn't hurt so badly. Even though I was in a lot of pain, I decided to go to work because I needed a few more sales that month so that I could have more party money for the next few weeks. My leg was hurting so bad that I couldn't make a sale. As the pain became more intense, I finally left work to go home and go lie down and get my feet elevated. My leg felt better in that position. Sorry, folks, I skipped a page. That evening, I went back to the nightclub with some friends. But no matter how stoned I got that night, my leg was killing me. And it wasn't much fun. I declined dancing with any of the ladies who asked me to, telling them my old football injury was acting up, and it's too difficult to dance. Of course, I received a great deal of sympathy that night, sympathy points from the girls that night. Several of them bought me drinks and sat at my table. They were talking with me, but it was difficult holding a conversation with them with all the pain in my leg. I left around midnight and I drove straight home. I awoke in severe pain around 7:30 the next morning. What a horrible day this is going to be, I thought. That's when I decided it was time I need to see a doctor. So I took a shower, got dressed, and started calling around to see if there was any doctor available to see me. I finally found one that was open on Saturdays, and he told me to come on in. Around 9:30 that morning, I arrived at the doctor's office and filled out all the required paperwork. The doctor seemed like a nice guy. "Well, Mr. Tuttle, what seems to be your problem?" the doctor had asked while looking at the paperwork I'd filled out. Before I could respond, though, he continued, "Ah, I see you're having Charlie horses or leg cramps in your left leg. How old are you?" he asked. "Well, I'm 26, almost 27, I answered. "Well, drop your pants so I can have a look at it," the doctor said. So I dropped my pants, and the doctor blurted out, "That leg's really swollen." Then the doctor had me lie flat on my back on this little exam table while he poked at my leg, took measurements of both calves, listened with his stethoscope to something in both legs. He then stood up straight and said, "I think you have thrombone phlebitis. It's a blood clot deep within the calf of the leg, and it causes swelling like this. How old are you again?" I told him, and he asked, "Do you smoke a lot of cigarettes?" I replied, "I smoke a pack or two a day, depending on how many customers I have to wait on." The conversation then turned quite serious, as the doctor explained to me that what could happen if I didn't receive treatment for the thrombone phlebitis right away. He even called the hospital for me and told them that I'd be coming right over. But I had other ideas, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. I left the doctor's office thinking that blood clots were for old people, not someone my age. I thought that maybe if I just elevated my leg and for the rest of the weekend, it would go away. So I bypassed the hospital. I went straight home. I took a couple of pillows from the bedroom and put them into the living room and propped my leg up on the sofa, sat back and just watched TV all day. A young lady I know named Jennifer came over and, well, she helped take care of me that evening. But the pain continued for several days. One morning, a few days later, the throbbing woke me up around 5 a.m. It hurt worse than ever before. Every time my heart would beat, it felt like my leg was just going to explode. I couldn't fall back to sleep. I still went to work that day, but by lunchtime, I knew I had to do something about it, and soon. Chapter 2. Back to my childhood. So how had I gotten this far off course in my life, in my walk with the Lord? You see, when I was a kid, around 8 years old, I accepted Jesus into my life, and I got baptized shortly thereafter that. Then, when I was 10 years old, I received the baptism of the Holy Spirit. All through my preteen and teenage years, I tried to serve the Lord. Back then, I was made fun of sometimes because of it, but I did have my friends at church, so that made things a little better at times. One of my best friends at church during those years was Nick Tavani. Nick was one of the smartest people I knew, and he played the piano. Nick became president of our CA, our Christ Ambassadors group. The CA was a group of teenagers from our church in Forestville, Maryland, which was an Assemblies of God church. Nick accepted me, and I guess you could say he didn't judge me the way some other kids did. Oh, he might have thought I was odd, but he still accepted me. I looked up to Nick and his family. They had a great walk with the Lord, and Nick was so talented and smart. Nick often helped me understand things in life that I was unaware of in my little small world. You see, my childhood wasn't the best. I had a father who beat me a lot, but also had a mother who loved me and prayed for me daily. My father was a bricklayer, a big and strong man who worked all the time trying to get ahead in life. He would work as many as 3 different jobs at the same time to make sure we had food on the table and a roof over our heads. As a bricklayer, he would work his regular 8 to 10 hour days, then come home, shower, and go do a side job. Additionally, every Thursday night, he would go to the local supermarket and mop their floors. I had 3 sisters and 1 brother. As a kid, I would sit in class and watch the teacher as she taught stuff so slowly that it felt like I was watching paint dry. So I would just look out the window of my class and dream about being in the woods across from the playground. I would dream about being Davy Crockett or Daniel Boone. But the problem was, I was in the classroom. My mind was so active with thought. I have since been diagnosed with ADHD. But back then, they did not know about ADHD, so I was just considered a bad kid. When the teacher would notice that I was looking out the window and fidgeting around in my chair, she would ask me a question on whatever subject that she was doing. And I had no idea what she was talking about. Now, this got me sent to the principal's office a lot. Everything was just too slow for me. I didn't try to be bad. Always tried to do the right thing. I just lost interest in things quickly and, well, I wanted to know what's next. I just couldn't help it. I hated school and I wanted to go out and play in the woods. Anything but sit there in class. This behavior was also displayed at home, where the consequences were much worse. At school, the worst thing that could happen was the principal would use her paddle on me. She had broken a few of them on me before, but she only swatted me 3 times at the most. At home, it was much worse, because my father would beat me with a belt. Remember, he was a big, strong man. He was a bricklayer. He knew how to swing that belt, and 15 to 20 lashes was common. Most of my childhood, I had welts all over my behind, my legs, my back, and sometimes the welts would bleed. My father had such anger towards me. I eventually found out why, and I'll explain that later in the book. Some days he'd come home from work, and if I didn't get out of the house before he came home, he'd beat me with a belt asking me, "What did you do wrong today? I know you did something. What was it?" Finally got wise to that, and as soon as I saw him take off his belt, I made up stuff that I had done wrong, just so my dad would stop beating me so much. If I waited until he started beating me, I might get 10 or 15 whacks with the belt and then admit to something and get 10 or 15 more whacks with the belt. But if I just made something up, he'd only hit me maybe 10 or 15 times, 20 at the most. To make matters worse for me as a kid, I'd been born with a deformed left hand and arm. So not only did I get abuse from my dad, but at school, most of the kids made fun of me. And it seemed like someone always wanted to start a fight with me or beat me up after school. I wasn't a violent kid, but I quickly got tired of kids hitting me and making fun of me, so I stood up to them. I may have been really skinny, but I was really strong. I hated fighting because it reminded me of my dad, and I know how it felt to get beaten. So I tried everything I could to get out of a fight. But when I had no choice, I wasn't going to lose. You see, if I lost a fight, my dad found out about it, he'd whip me so hard and tell me that I wasn't man enough and other hurtful things like that. When I was just 9 years old, one day right after school on the playground, I punched a kid in a fight so hard it knocked him out. I thought I'd killed him because his eyes rolled back in his head and he just went down like a limp dish rag. I was scared and, of course, took off running fast. I ran to my house, which was about a half a mile away, and told my mother. Told her what happened, how this kid had started a fight with me, and how I hit him and I thought I killed him. My mother grabbed her keys and we got in her car and, well, she drove as fast as she could back to my school. When we got there, the school nurse was just bringing this kid around with smelling salts. Thank God I didn't kill him. He was only knocked out. For a few weeks after that fight, no kids picked on me because, well, they were afraid of me, that I would knock them out too. Finally, I enjoyed a few weeks of peace in my life. No one to fight, and I could walk home without fear. This bears repeating. I really didn't want to fight and never started a fight in my life. I always made the other person swing at me or hit me first, with just one exception. There was one time I was egged on to starting a fight with a kid from across the street. I sucker punched him, and he wouldn't fight. I felt so bad that I ran home, up to my room, and I started crying. Later that day, I went over to his house and apologized to him and asked him for his forgiveness. I couldn't believe that I actually hit a kid for no reason. As far as I was concerned, I was no better than my father for doing that. During junior high school, I didn't dress out for PE a lot because I was too embarrassed about all the welts all over my back and my legs. I didn't want all the other kids thinking I was a bad person. So I hid this very well throughout all 7th and 8th grade. Then one day when I was 14, I finally stood up to my dad and he quit beating me. I can remember that day very well. It was a rainy Sunday morning late in November, and I just happened to walk downstairs at the wrong time. My father was upset because there wasn't enough wood in the wood box by the fireplace to his liking. He was standing in our family room next to the fireplace, so he saw me when I reached the bottom of the steps, coming into the room, and he said something about getting more wood for the firebox. But to be honest, I didn't know he was talking to me. My dad called me over to him and slapped me right across the face. It nearly knocked me out. As I was falling back from the hit, I could hear my father yelling at me about putting some wood in a box. After I hit the floor and started to regain myself, I told him that I'm in my church clothes and asked him if I can get more wood after church. This just upset him all the more that I would try to reason with him. After all, no one ever questioned him. He wanted more pieces of wood in the firebox, or in the firewood box, and he wanted it right then and right there, and expected my immediate obedience to his command. Next thing I knew, my dad had picked me up in the air with one hand and hit me in the chest with the other hand. It knocked the breath out of me and stunned me for a few moments. As I got up this time, I was very mad and I'd had enough. And I shook my fist at my father and I said, "You hit me one more time and I'll kill you." I can picture my father's face right now as it went from anger to laughter. It started with a small little grin and then went to a bit of a chuckle. Then it grew out to a hearty laugh. "So you're going to take me on?" my father asked with a huge smile across his face. I said, "Yes, and I'm not going to let you keep hitting me like this anymore. I'd rather die trying than allow you to keep hitting me." The next thing I knew, he walked away and said, "Go to church." After that, my father never laid a hand on me again. High school was really different for me. I was rather timid back then and kept mostly to myself, though I did allow a few kids from church to get close, or a little close to me. I became so shy in my high school years that I only talked to a few people in school. I did have a girlfriend, and back in the 60s, holding hands was a big deal, and to kiss a girl was about as far as you would even think of going. I had a respect for her, and because you knew that anything further was wrong. My puppy love didn't last long, but it was my first, and I have great clean memories about it. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't a perfect kid back then. Actually, I was pretty messed up. With all that my father had put me through and the harassment from the other kids and all the teachers and adults thinking that I was a bad kid growing up, I was very insecure. I made a lot of mistakes and never really knew what was the right thing to do in many situations. I was always afraid that I wasn't smart enough to be around anyone my age or older. I believed there was something wrong with me because even my own father rejected me as a child. I didn't find out until my early 20s that I actually have a pretty high IQ of 136. Because I was pretty much of a loner in high school, I used to listen to music a lot. I could sing pretty well back then, but was too shy to get up in front of people by myself. However, I enjoyed singing in the church choir and at the school choir. Even though I was made fun of in high school, I still loved my music. Music was something that I didn't just hear, I felt it too. I love music. So after high school, I went to a very small Bible college up in Maine. I didn't have the money to attend, but I was accepted anyways. They allowed me to earn my way through by working on their farm. Someone had given the college a dairy farm, and the first thing that needed to be done was, of course, clean out the stalls. However, that was not fun. But I enjoyed going to college there. I was taught about public speaking by the president of the college. I can remember him calling me out in class and having me say the word Obadiah. He made me stand up and say it out loud. I had to fill the whole room up with my voice. Now, as I said earlier, I was very shy back then and was afraid to speak in public. But I loved the Lord and I wanted to preach. And our instructor worked with me within a few weeks. I was over my fear and I was ready to preach. This school had connections with churches all over the state of Maine that would allow students to come and preach. I went to one church outside of Bangor, Maine, and stayed there with the pastor and his wife during a Thanksgiving break. I was there to work for my stay, which meant I got to preach. My first sermon I ever got to preach was on Romans 12:20. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. This was an old church, and that platform was made of hardwood and no carpeting on it, and underneath of it was all hollow, very hollow. Every step you took on echoed throughout the building. I was very nervous, and I was only 18 years old, and it was my first time being responsible to preach. So I kind of rocked back and forth and kind of just tapping my feet while I was preaching, and I guess that made more noise than my preaching. I had someone come up to me after the service and tell me the next time to try to keep my feet still so they could hear me, hear the sermon. I was embarrassed, but it didn't stop me. I loved the Lord so much back then. Then one trip home, I met a girl who got my attention really quick. She was not a Christian, but she was so darn cute. Well, we fell in love, what I thought was love. Within my 2-week stay at home, and she begged me not to leave her to go back to college. She convinced me that I could make better money doing something other than preaching, which is true. She thought I would be perfect for sales, and she got me a job at the gym store. It's called a government employee membership store, where she worked at in the pharmacy. To make a long story short, that is why I left college, and that is when I slipped up and walked away from the Lord. Boy, when I make a mistake, I usually make a big one. That's the end of chapter 1 and 2. And the name of the college, by the way, was Faith School of Theology. I think it's called Faith Bible School. It's still in Maine. It's not in Brooklyn, Maine anymore. It's some other place in Maine. But I know they're still doing the same thing. And it's supposed to be a wonderful college. Anyways, the next video will be chapter 3, maybe 3 and 4. We'll see. And if you haven't got my book, please go and order it. A Journey to Hell, Heaven, and Back. You just go to ivantuttle.com. ivantuttle.com. Right there you can order a book. And if you would like to donate anything to the ministry and help support this ministry, because I do a lot of missions work, I do a lot of other things, I help a lot of people. And to be honest with you, I give away a lot of these books. I've given away thousands of these books. I buy them too. I have a publisher. It's a traditional publishing job. Maybe you've heard of Sid Roth before. Sid Roth is actually my publisher. It's Supernatural Press, which is a part of Destiny Publishing and the rest of them. So that's who my book is through. But just go to ivantuttle.com. Get yourself a book, all right? God bless. Have a great day. See you on the next video.